The fallen leaves tell a story.
Perhaps just as much as she was the vessel for the greater will, Queen Marika was a decisive, calculating monarch, a ruler who consistently sought to maintain the power that was granted to her. This is especially true when she encounters the other powers of the lands between, and the ones that gave her Golden Order the most contestation are found within the western reaches of the continent, in mist-laden Liurnia. Within this eerie, ever-sinking land of humid forests, high cliffs, and luminous crystals can be found the twin hearts of the discipline of sorcery, the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Royal House of Caria. Unlike the miracle workers of the Golden Order, the sorcerers derive their power from the astral bodies above, the moon and the stars, the expanse beyond mortal touch and comprehension. As the Golden Order receives its power from the amber of the Erd Tree, the sorcerers derive theirs from an infinitely larger body. From the stars descends glintstone, calcified astral power, the amber of the cosmos. Their ancient ancestors would slice open their own hearts to imbue primal glintstone within their bodies. While the old predecessors died, the modern age saw the sorcerers perfect primal glintstone within themselves, a material manifestation of their souls, ones that could even be transferred from one body to another. For one sorceress, however, her power derived from the grace of the full moon itself. She rose to become the champion of the Academy and queen of the House of Caria, Rennala. Young Rennala of Caria was an astrologer who gazed at the night sky and always chased the stars. On one such night, however, she met the full moon, that luminescent orb in the sky, so bewitching, so mysterious. And, in time, the neophyte astrologer became the matriarch of the Carian line and enchanted the scholars of Raya Lucaria with her lunar magic, soon becoming their master, their queen, and establishing her family as the dominant name of power within Liurnia and sorcery as a whole. By the time Queen Marika established the epoch of the Erd Tree after the defeat of the giants, ancestral friends to the astrologers of old, Queen Rennala was beset by the forces of an order seeking lordship over the lands between. Leading the Golden Forces was perhaps second to Lord Godfrey, Marika's greatest champion, the fiery, red-haired warrior, Radahn. At Rennala's command, she dispatched her hands, her 20 enchanted knights, to lead and fight, their power matching the multitude of Marika's golden champions. 2 wars, the Liurnian Wars, would follow, with neither the armies of Gold nor Moon gaining advantage. And so Queen Marika set about on a most cunning plan to end this protracted conflict not with violence, but with a vow of repentance, a vow of love. At the height of the war, suddenly, Radahn renounced and repented for his territorial ambitions, and offered a vow of marriage to Queen Rennala, who accepted. The two were married at the Church of Vows, presided by Turtle Pope Muriel, uniting the houses of Moon and Erd Tree together in seeming harmony, and the Liurnian Wars came to an end. Together, Radahn and Rennala had 3 children, Radahn, Rykard, and Ranni, the subjects of this very video, who would carve paths from this union towards godhood, towards rebellion, towards blasphemy. All would come down one day, when Godfrey would lose his divine spark when his grace was taken away upon the completion of his conquests in the lands between. Godfrey would leave the lands and leave Marika with no Elden Lord by her side. Yet, like a switch, Radahn leaves Rennala to return to Leyndell and betroth himself to Marika and become the second Elden Lord. His children with Rennala would be elevated by their new stepmother and acquire the power of demigods. As a token, Radahn left behind for Rennala an amber egg, infused with a peculiar power of rebirth, for within lies a great rune of the unborn. Rennala, however, was left heartbroken, emotionally ruined by Radagon's departure, and it was in this moment of vulnerability that the Academy saw that she was no champion of theirs at all. They would lock their former queen away in the Grand Library and proceed to lay siege to Caria Manor in contemptible retribution. The Orders of the Moon have come undone, and for Queen Marika, the last piece on the board swiftly crushed. And poor Rennala would live out her days locked away with the last reminder of her husband, who is also her hated enemy. As we will find out, though, Rennala's 3 children, now Demigod Stepchildren, would serve to act as forces that would try to uphold, uproot, and usurp the power of the Erd-Tree and the Greater Will. Perhaps, in the case of 2 children in particular, their acts served as retribution to tear down the system that led to the ruin of their house of birth and for their mother's pain. For as long as humankind can turn and gaze upwards, we have long been fascinated and similarly bewitched by the moon and the stars. Since prehistoric times, humans have kept track of the cycles of the moon, and it was in this development that gave rise to conceptualizing units of time, and eventually days, weeks, and months. In fact, for us in the English-speaking world, the words month and moon stem from the Proto-Indo-European word for the moon, menot, with the Proto-Indo-European verbal root me, meaning to measure, which, as Oxford University professors James Mallory and Douglas Adams put it, indicate a functional conception of the moon as a marker of the month. We can see an identical situation in Chinese as well, with the word yue acting as both the word to describe the moon and a classifier for months in the Chinese calendar. Just as it is the world's oldest timekeeping device, the moon has also served as an important cultural symbol all over the world, because early humans are bound to extrapolate some meaning from this mysterious glowing orb in the sky. And when there are mythologies, there are moon deities. From our old friends in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, to the imperial cult of Luna in the Roman Empire, and from the dynamic duo of Chang'e and Tuoye in China, to the mysterious unnamed moon goddess of the ancient Mayan civilization. Most, but not all, moon deities are female, which is often attested to the implicit link made by ancient stargazers between the 29.5-day lunar cycle and the menstrual cycle, with the word menstruate having linguistic roots in the Latin mensis, meaning month, which in turn is related to the ancient Greek mene, meaning moon. This link gives the moon its traditionally feminine association, and some cultures saw it as a means for women to become powerful. For the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, for instance, menstruation is traditionally important because it marks the time when a female can bring life into the world, putting them on the same level of powerful creative abilities as their creator deity, the rainbow serpent. The cycles of the moon and female empowerment are crucial aspects pertaining to the story of Rennala, a woman whose power derives from a full moon that has far more literal power to it than the wave-dictating orb in our world. She utilized this lunar power to take control of the most powerful institution of magic and secure lives for her children, the children who would grow up to exemplify the ideals and the nadirs of the Golden Order.
Before we begin, allow me to paint you the full picture. General Radahn is cursed ever to wander. Eaten from the inside by Malenia's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone. Now he gathers the corpses of former friends and foes alike, gorging on them like a dog.
I was born a champion's cub. Now I am the lord of the battlefield's lion.
The mightiest, strongest demigod of them all, Radahn the Star Scourge was second only to Godfrey in terms of martial prowess, leading his Redmanes to achieve great feats on the battlefield. It makes sense, considering that, from a young age, Radahn was always an admirer of heroes, idolizing Lord Godfrey and incorporating his own armor with leonine symbols, emblematic of Godfrey's regent, Serosh. Radahn was fond of inheriting his father's flaming red hair, with it carrying heroic implications, a feature that his father, ironically, hated, as they were similar to the red locks of the hated fire giants of old. As his son Radahn grew up, he also grew in size, almost to that of a giant. Perhaps the red hair is less of a heroic symbol, but a sign of a curse. As much as he adored his own hair, Radahn also loved his steed, Leonard, but he would outgrow the scrawny horse and threaten to crush it. So, to ensure that Leonard may continue to be his loyal mount as he grew into a giant, he would study gravitational magic in the town of Celia in Caelid, under the tutelage of one of the mysterious Alabaster Lords, beings who arise from interstellar comets from long ago. Even after losing his mind to Malenia's scarlet rot during the Shattering, Radahn never abandoned Leonard, tirelessly holding up his forsaken master as he fed on the corpses of friend and foe. But the original purpose for mastering his gravitational power would be outshined by the deeds he would enact with it. With great manipulation of gravity comes great responsibility in repelling threats from beyond. The Alabaster Lords that taught Radahn were but nobler visitors. The worst were the Isbell, living stars malformed and ever destructive, who long ago assailed the eternal cities below the lands between. With his magic, Radahn arrested the cycles of the stars in their place, effectively conquering them, earning him the immortal moniker of Star Scourge. While his feats may have stopped interstellar threats from interfering for as long as he lives, it also had the side effect of declaring his allegiance to the Golden Order than the house of his origin through his actions. The House of Caria derives their guidance and power from stellar motion, and causing them to stop in their place effectively neutered their capabilities, their ability to read into the threads of fate itself, something that his sister, Ranni, wishes to undo with his death. And that is the crux of what Radahn is as a character. He is the successor of the status quo, or at least would have been, should the Elden Ring never have shattered and him not losing his mind to scarlet rot. His very reason for existence is honoring the lords of the battlefield that came before him, chiefly that of the greatest warrior of all, Godfrey, who, again, inspired his aesthetic image. And his reasoning for learning gravity magic, that which led to his legend, was so that he could still ride the horse he loved in his younger days, even though Lynne is a scrawny old boy who still struggles to keep the giant demigod on his back even years later. Radahn even refuses to die to scarlet rot. Okay, well, perhaps it's luck and a godly constitution that really saved him, but I'd like to believe that he is simply refusing fate itself as the rot eats away at his very being. That rot is the same that afflicts his home of Caelid, the site of his legendary battle with Malenia the Severed, where at the end of the Shattering she unleashed a bloom of scarlet rot. Today, Radahn's warriors, the Redmanes, endure in their eternal mission of staving away the rot and the beasts afflicted with its pestilent influence. The Redmane Knights, some of the most well-renowned soldiers of the lands between, burn the crest on their left breast of their armor to indicate their resolve to not return home. Until the threat of the rot has been stopped from spreading further, they will forever be a fiery bulwark. Radahn would have been proud of his pride of Redmanes in their defense, but he is instead warped into a thing similar to the beasts that his warriors hunt, which would require his commander, Castellan, and comrade Jaren, formerly of the House of Caria, to hold the Radahn Festival, a means to attract the champions of the lands between to bring the mightiest demigod an honorable death. And death does come to Radahn, only after being defeated in battle by a tarnished champion. As his life leaves him, so too does his grip on the stars, furthering the agenda of his lunar sister to overthrow the order he once loved.
Very well. Together we will devour the very core.
I'm going to say this now. Rykard, the recusant lord of blasphemy, is a bastard. The most insidious of the demigods, his dastardly bastard deeds go even further than his transformation into a horrific serpent monster. Rykard is not the warrior that Radahn is, but what this son of Rennala possesses is cunning persuasion, of the rhetorical but also physical, as we will see soon enough. Under the Golden Order, Rykard served as a ruthless justiciar who commanded a company of inquisitors. Rykard was judge and executioner, for there was no jury to be found under his law. His inquisitors persecuted and mercilessly tortured those considered heretics to the Golden Order, such as the Omen and other Crucible Touched we discussed in the last video. Chief among Rykard's animosities, however, are the Albinorics, artificial life forms made from human hands, believed by the Order to live impure lives. He was the one who ordered the construction of the Iron Virgins, automatons which were capable of both battlefield carnage and abducting victims for interrogation and experimentation. Rykard was as dutiful in dispensing capital punishment as he was a scholar. As he was the son of a master wizard, Rykard inherited the magical aptitude of his mother, and found a particular calling with the hexes of Mount Gilmere. He spent time on that craggy mound, where he discovered the sorceries of ancient magma, bringing them into practical, modern use. It is in these discoveries into pyroclastic magics that Rykard would also learn of the great serpent Igle, the subject of a now-forgotten ancient religion on Mount Gilmere, whose worship threatened the Erd Tree in ancient times. Unlike the conflicts with the giants and dragons, however, not much is known about Igle and their cult opposing the Erd Tree, but what is known is that the serpent has long been seen as a symbol of treachery, and the people of Leyndell especially reveled in its symbolic battering, which is also why the gladiators we found throughout the lands between bear such symbolism. Seeing such a heretical idol beaten and battered brought rapturous delight to the audience. It was within the dark caverns of Gelmir where Rykard would discover the very serpent that these ancient people worshipped. Perhaps it was here in the Serpent's chambers that Rykard realized the prospect of power separate from the Erdtree, one that is taken by force instead of bestowed by a higher power. The seeds of blasphemy have been sown. With the renown he accrued from his discoveries, Rykard would establish his own foothold atop the mountain, fittingly naming his fortress Volcano Manor, as it would be set within Gelmir's roaring magma and around the site of the once revered, now hated, god-devouring serpent. The hatred of the serpent is something that is shared in our world. Most in the Western world are likely familiar with the tale of the serpent seducing Eve with the power to be like God in the Garden of Eden. The serpent is often seen as a malevolent force because, evolutionarily speaking, snakes have been the most consistently feared predator to primates and humans for millions of years. As humans evolved, we have found means to stave off physically bigger and faster predators and reach the top of the food chain, but we have yet to develop immunity to snake venom. And thus, snakes have always found sneaky ways to continue biting at our ankles ever since. It is precisely the snake's venom and cunning that has cemented its status in the human imagination as a symbol of danger and death. However, like all symbolism, this interpretation is not universal. As snakes are feared for their venomous bite, so too are they renowned for their metamorphic properties, as seen through their regular shedding of skin. The snake, therefore, is also seen as a symbol of fertility, transformation, and immortality. For cultures that believe in reincarnation, such as those following Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, the snake is seen as not a threat or omen, but an important actor in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. In the Hindu tradition of Vaishnavism, the divine Nagaraja Shesha is seen as the bed which Narayana, a form of Vishnu, would slumber until the next cycle of creation. One might be familiar with the Ouroboros, the image of the serpent devouring itself, which appears as a frequent symbol of eternity throughout different mythologies. Jormungandr, the world serpent of Norse mythology, is perhaps the most famous example of an Ouroboros creature, becoming the boundary between the material and eternity, forever flowing until Ragnarok comes. For the serpent Igle in the lands between, it falls into the former camp, a symbol of treachery, avarice, and corruption to the dominant culture of the Erdtree and the Golden Order. A symbol that, as his disdain for the Order will show, would be a very attractive idol to Rykard, for he is the perfect quarry for Igle. A violent, ambitious lord, Rykard values the place of status he was born into and does not particularly care what order rules, so long as he maintains his place of privilege and can still dispense disproportionate punishment onto perceived impurities. Alongside him in his rule is his consort, Tanith. Once a dancer from a foreign land, she was charmed and courted by Rykard on his travels outside the lands between. Very much like how Justinian I of Byzantium took on Theodora, who was a dancer and performer before ascending to become Empress of the Byzantine Empire. Though it seems that, unlike Theodora, Tanith did not have much influence over Rykard, which I personally feel is a missed opportunity to not reflect the historical parallel. But Rykard's loyalty to the Erdtree does take an abyssal turn at one point, the cause of which is unclear, whether it be a difference of philosophy or the influence of a serpentine force. Rykard was drawn into the dire plot of his sister, Ranni, the plot to kill Godwin the Golden. On the night of the Black Knives, Ranni rewarded Rykard with a blasphemous claw engraved with the traces of the Rune of Death, where should the coming trespass one day transpire, he may challenge the black beast of destined death, Malekith. That day, however, would never come, for as Rykard grew ever more resentful of the Erdtree, so too did his descent into blasphemy. Rykard's indignant philosophy reached a praxis during the Shattering. To him, the Erdtree and the gods demand that their children fight over meager scraps of power is the most debasing thing imaginable. Why should he and his demigod kind be brought so low by what he sees as an attempt to hold on what little power the gods retain? Taking by force became the ethos of the Justiciar, now a rebel son trying to usurp the old order. Rykard's ambitions, though blasphemous, marked him a worthy sovereign by many, who admired his seemingly heroic aspirations. Those that followed and stood by the banner of Volcano Manor became known as the Recusants, warriors of Lord Rykard. The Recusants battled the armies of Leyndell upon the desolate ascent of Mount Gelmir, where the most horrific battles of the Shattering would take place. Iron virgins torturing prey within their cold mechanical grasp, spirits corrupted and ulcerated by the felling of their sacred minor Erdtrees. Battles that saw unending bloodshed between the Iron Recusants and Golden Warriors of Leyndell. Battles so long that the lines between enemies and comrades became blurry. As the soldiers on both sides succumbed to madness, mutilating and devouring one another, they would invite within them the accursed flame of frenzy. As the Shattering and the battles of Gelmir raged on, Rykard began to truly lose himself and turned towards the subject of his sorcerous research, the blasphemous Serpent itself. Whether as an act of devotion or as a desperate escape, Rykard fed himself, great rune and all, to the Serpent. In the final moments before being devoured, Rykard briefly saw a vision, a future wherein he sees the Serpent devouring the world. And in these restless dreams, he would become the Serpent. He would finally become the Lord of Blasphemy. Following his abhorrent transformation, Rykard's lofty, rebellious ambitions degraded into a more simplistic, gluttonous depravity, to grow in power by feeding on the most powerful champions, starting with the ones who stood by him. Together, they would join him as family. The soldiers that once rallied under his banner were disturbed by what had become of their master, and the costly toll that these battles took upon them led to their desertion of that old cause, resentful and filled with shame. It's why we only find a single set of Gelmir Knight's armor in the game, for it is a reminder of a hope tarnished, of a disgraced lord brought to the lowest point imaginable. The Lord of Blasphemy cared not when his soldiers left him, for he found a force more befitting of his serpentine nature. The man-serpents, the deformed offspring of a repellent birthing ritual that is simply too horrible to allude to on YouTube. Some did not rest at simply deserting Rykard, though, and even attempted to face their lord in battle and put him to rest. But the scales of the immortal serpent he became proved that normal armaments are useless. So, some of Rykard's knights sought a weapon to kill their lost lord, and found one within the ancient Serpent Hunter, a magical armament that does exactly that. But they failed, and the last survivor would leave this superweapon behind in the Serpent's lair, hoping to find a worthy champion that might wield it and kill Rykard, sparing his master from further dishonor. Tanith's efforts of luring great champions proved to be her beloved lord's undoing, whether by doing their bidding or finding the path to him within the infernal dungeons of Volcano Manor. The tarnished champion reaches Rykard's chambers to claim his great rune, utilizing the ancient Serpent Hunter to slew the Lord of Blasphemy in his lair. And yet, a serpent never dies. And if the Tarnished decides to tell Lady Tanith of Rykard's demise, she retreats to his chambers to devour on his tremendous, scaly corpse, to do unto her lord just as the serpent did unto he.
My beloved, have no fear. I will hold thee. Patience. born forever and ever. Upon my name as Ranni the Witch. Mother's rich slumber shall not be disturbed by thee. Foul trespasser. Send word far and wide.
Ranni is the most peculiar of Renalla's children, in that she alone is an Empyrean, a chosen of the Two Fingers to be a potential successor to godhood after Queen Marika. This is unusual, because the other confirmed Empyreans living in the lands between are the twins Miquella and Melania, who were born from the self-union of Marika and Radahn, born from one being, one god. Considering her unusual status, I presume that Ranni was born not directly from the union of Radahn and Renala, but from the amber egg that Radahn left behind as he returned to Leyndell to be with Marika. Then again, it could have just been easily a fluke of fate that Ranni was chosen to succeed and not her brothers. It's frankly one of the game's more inscrutable mysteries. I cannot find a reasonable explanation that does not contain a lot of holes or contradictions. But what matters most about Ranni is not the circumstances of her birth, but instead what she would define later in life. Due to her Empyrean status, Ranni was granted a shadow, Blaidd the half-wolf, who would grow up alongside her as a sort of foster brother, always watched over and accompanied by the Carian royal blacksmith, the troll, e.g. Blaidd, like Malekith from Marika, is entrusted with the grim task of dispatching the Empyreans should they diverge from the path of the Two Fingers, something which the Lunar Princess is fully aware of later in her life of plotting.
Tell the Two Fingers that Ranni the Witch cometh to rend thy flesh with a fateful wound, ne'er to heal.
In childhood, she was guided in the magical arts by her mother, Renala, but it was a snowy witch that Ranni encountered in the woods of Liurnia who showed the young demigod a dark moon of her own. Ranni's secret mentor taught the young Empyrean to fear the dark moon as she imparted knowledge of cold, freezing sorceries. With this knowledge of the dark moon, her symbol of power and authority, Ranni would set the stage not to bewitch an academy, but the entirety of the lands between. Although the Two Fingers had chosen her as Marika's successor, Ranni did not wish to be a puppet for the Greater Will and resented her Empyrean fate, as she disagreed with the ways of the Golden Order, historical opposites and old enemies to the Carian royals. Her father's sudden departure from the family and her mother's subsequent emotional breakdown may have also contributed to the seeding of the plot, to separate the world from the will of outer beings, of the Greater Will and its Two Fingers, culminating in the shattering of the Elden Ring, the binding logic of the world. The first step in this cosmic divorce is a personally daunting one for Ranni, escaping her Empyrean fate, which would require the sacrifice of body and soul. Cunning as cold death, Ranni saw that these sacrifices can come in two, one to sacrifice their body, and the other to sacrifice their soul. Ranni chose to sacrifice her body as a means of perpetual life, to fulfill her long-term goal of overthrowing the Golden Order. As for the sacrifice of soul, she set her sights on the golden boy of Queen Marika, Godwin the Golden. To kill an immortal demigod, Ranni would require the Rune of Death, and stole a fragment of it from Malekith the Black Blade. Through a fearsome rite, Ranni imbued the Rune of Death into the blades of assassins, Numen women close to Queen Marika herself. These knives, once blades of calling for wayward maidens, twisted and blackened with the power of death, the power to permanently kill a demigod. How Ranni managed to sway those close to Marika is a mystery. Some would even suggest that Marika was in on her stepdaughter's plot to remove the world from the gaze of the Greater Will, but it will likely remain unknown for the time being. As the assassins plunged their black daggers into the flesh of Godwin, Ranni simultaneously sacrificed herself, her own body burning into a husk, while her half-brother's soul perishes. All that is left is a living, soulless body, one that gives life to those who live in death, a likely unintended consequence of Ranni's ritual. And as her brothers and sisters spilled blood for power, Ranni withdrew from the world, hiding in her ancestral manor while her agents worked to bring about her plans, allowing her to pursue her divine ascension on her own terms. As her porcelain form sat atop her tower, Ranni would encounter what could be her greatest asset, a tarnished champion hurtling about on a spectral steed. What would follow is Ranni's questline, where the player would help her achieve her goals by obtaining a finger killer, slaying her rot-addled brother, and bringing her further to apotheosis. It is a series of events with which players would no doubt be familiar, considering that the Steam trophy for achieving her ending has a higher cumulative completion rate than the basic Elden Lord ending. And it is the ending that I wish to discuss here in lieu of summarizing the questline. After defeating the final boss within the Erd Tree, the Tarnished can summon Ranni, where she will reveal to them the full extent of her plan, to succeed Queen Marika as god of this world, end the stagnant Golden Order, and bring about an age of stars, which would see her removing herself, her order, and her tarnished consort far from the lands between. Just as she violently severed her connection to the two fingers, she too severs her new order away from the terrestrial affairs of normal mortals, to journey out into the cosmos. Her journey is not out of any malice, but for a sense of compassion, allowing its inhabitants to have free will over their own choices and live their lives, with no interference from any outer beings. Marika won wars not through clashing of flesh and steel, but through the vows of matrimony. Love does truly conquer all, and it surely conquered Queen Radahn, so enamored with Marika's other self, her leal hound. It makes it all the more tragic to consider the state in which the Queen of the Full Moon sits in at this very moment, still locked away in the Academy's Grand Library, deliriously reincarnating juvenile scholars, her ghostly daughter the only one to protect her in her times of need. The Demigod Stepchildren are perhaps the most dynamic and disparate of Queen Marika's progeny, but all are brought together not by their parents, but by their shared senses of ambition, whether it be to conserve the order of Lord Godfrey, or to supplant that old order with a new one. The red-haired stepchildren are some of the most decisive actors of the Shattering, and yet, despite their many deific feats, only one managed to listen to Marika's words. As two were consumed and sacrificed, one rose to make of themselves that which they desire. For these three flames of ambition, the spirit had burned twice as fast, and under the full moon, one held their fire steadily to be the brightest of them all.
Hear me, demigods, my children beloved. Make thyselves that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.